What is it you want to be in life? Say you want to, if you were to become a brain surgeon, you wouldn't just read about brain surgery. You'd go watch the brain surgeon operate. And if you can, talk to a brain surgeon. Tell them, I want to be one like you. Tell me, give me some advice. I say this about comedians all the time. If you want to become a comedian, go watch other comedians perform. If on the stage you want to be on, go watch people perform on that stage. And if you can, talk to that comedian and say, how did you get there? And watch how that comedian, don't take parts of his act. You got to write your own act, but watch how they go from one subject to another, or how their stage presence or their microphone technique. I've seen a lot of comedians who have very bad microphone technique. But knowing when to pull the mic into for a punchline or when to pull away or whatever. Anyhow, study the masters. If you don't know what it is, if you know what you want to be in life, that's great if you're young. And then therefore you've got a direct goal, and you can ask people in that profession, how did you get there? Please tell me how you, I snuck backstage of comedians, and I would knock on their door and ask them for advice. I'd say, I'm a comedian, will you give me some advice? So that's what I'd say, and also, start where you are. If you're going to become a comedian, start where you are. You live in Toledo, start there. Work as often as you can. Get up on stage as many times as you can, even if not as a comedian. Maybe you're just going to MC, but get in the habit of being stage presence. 3, you might want to read the book, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol.
The Magic of Believing.
The Magic of Believing. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect others to believe in you? But The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. It's not about comedy. It's just another motivation book. And 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. And people think, no one's ever going to help me. I said, they're not going to help you until you can make money for them. In show business, it's called show business. That's 2 words, show and business. So if when you can make money for them, then they're going to, when you develop an act that gets sold, so it's up. If it is to be, it's up to me. I got to make myself marketable. I look around at other comedians or other doctors or other lawyers are making money or whatever it is profession you want in, and see how they got there. So, and then 5, don't ever quit. Bertrand Russell said, there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have.
Story warriors, story weavers, all of you who believe in the power of your story to touch, encourage, and inspire someone, I want to invite you to draw your chairs closer, because today you're going to drink from a fire hose, so to speak. You're going to learn from a living legend who believes in the power of story and has been using his story to uplift and ignite action for well over 50 years. I mean, half of a century. There are very few people who have done it that long. I want to welcome into the Story Warrior channel, the Story Warrior Fireside, Mr. Tom Dreesen. Mr. Tom Dreesen, for those of you who may not know, has been an award-winning comedian for a long, long time. But more importantly, he is a philanthropist, and that comes very near to my heart because I have never met him, but out of the blue, out of the kindness of his heart, he has always reached out to me and encouraged me and uplifted me in so many ways. Good morning, Mr. Dreesen. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Los Angeles, California, Sherman Oaks, California, outside of Los Angeles. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's the center of showbiz, and looks like you have been there for a very long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm as you know, I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and I got in show business there. And at that time, if you were going to be a comedian, you had to come out here. You know, you could only do so much in Chicago. You could work on your craft. You could, build your repertoire of material and everything. But then eventually you had to come out here, either go to New York or come out here. And at that time, the Johnny Carson show was out here, the Tonight Show. And one appearance on that show changed your whole life. You know, comedians would do one appearance on that show and get a sitcom the next day. So at that time, comedians started moving out here to the West Coast. And I was one of them because I knew this is where the opportunity was,
Wow. This is it's a special moment because yes, you have done so much in the world of comedy. But I want you to take us back to South Side of Chicago, which I've never been there, but I've read many, many books, many accounts of South Side of Chicago being a very, very tough, rough and tumble kind of place. So you want to take us through your growing up years there and what made you to say, you know what, I'm going to go all the way to Hollywood. So first to South Side of Chicago.
Where do I begin? I tell Gideon, I tell everybody, if I close my eyes, no matter what I've done, no matter where I've been in the world, no matter what I've accomplished, if I close my eyes, I see a little boy, 10 years old, with a shoe shine box, trudging through the snow, going from tavern to tavern, shining shoes to get money to help feed my brothers and sisters.
Wow.
That's who I am in my heart. I'm that little boy, and who had a lot of dreams, and most of those dreams all came true. So I was born and raised in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. It was a blue collar town, steel mills and factories. We had a lot of factories. They made everything from clutch plates to crankshafts. There were a Buda, Ellis Chalmer, Buda Company. There was Wyman Gordon. There was a Perfection Gear. There was the Farrelloy Corporation, Whiting Corporation. Most of the men and women worked in these steel mills, and there were 36 taverns. So they would either go to the tavern before they went to work, or they go to the tavern after they went to work. It was a tavern community, and my mom and dad graced those taverns. My mom was a bartender, and my dad was a regular customer. Unfortunately for us children sometimes, but he loved his beer. My mom used to say, your father likes his beer. I said, Mom, he likes his beer, your beer, and the neighbor's beer too. He was an alcoholic, and a nice man, a docile man. But anyhow, so as a little boy, we had to get out. My older brother Glenn and I, who actually was 3 years older than me, but was almost like a father to me because he taught me work ethic. He taught me, if it is to be, it's up to me. We can't rely on anybody else. We have to go out and get it ourselves.
Yes.
So I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner. All of this to help feed my brothers and sisters, and none of this do I regret. It taught me many things. One of the other things too, going back to philanthropy, I remember as a little boy, we lived in a shack. We had no bathtub and no shower. We had no hot water. It was a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. And I remember that every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, the civic groups in Harvey, Illinois, the Moose, the Kiwanis, the Elks, the JCs, these civic groups would bring baskets of fruit and ham and turkey and these wonderful delicacies that my brothers and sisters and I rarely experience, and my proud Irish mother would turn them away. She'd say, no, my husband has a job. We don't deserve this. and she was right. Yeah. He had a job and he should have been taking care of us, but however, she gave in years later, and we and us kids were reaching around the door trying to get at those goodies, and so but later we accepted those gifts, and my mom did. And that taught me something, that if you leave Americans alone, maybe every community, but if you leave them alone, they won't let their neighbors starve. That made me realize, I believe that sometimes the welfare program might have been the worst thing that happened to the community, because we didn't have welfare when I was there was no such thing as that. So if it is to be, it was up to you. You had to go out and work. And children in that area, knew that. I mean, I shined shoes with other kids from other neighborhoods, and so we all knew that we had to go out and get it. And I'm going to digress for a minute, but when welfare first started, it was supposed to be temporary till you got back up on your feet. And today, now 6-7 generations are now addicted to it and cannot live without it. And so I believe in people helping people, and so that was my childhood.
Wow.
growing up that way. When I was 16 years old, I dropped out of high school because I was going to school with holes in my shoes and not very nice clothes. And when you're a kid in high school, kids, they dress to the nines if they can. And so I ended up dropping out of high school at 16 and working in the bowling alley and actually running with a pretty rough crowd. And doing some things and gotten some confrontations with the law a little bit. And finally, when I was 17, I went in the Navy and joined the Navy, and I spent 4 years in the Navy. And that made me grow up. A grade 17, the day I turned 17, when I was in boot camp, they shaved our head.
Yeah.
They all looked like
almost like mine.
Everybody had a shaved head, and everybody had the same clothes. And for the first time in my life, I was like equal to my peers visually. I was equal to my peers. And by the way, they had hot showers and clean bed. Yeah. I could stay in the shower as long as I wanted. That much hot water flow on me. To this day, if I get in the shower, nothing makes me feel more relaxed. Because we didn't have any of that as a kid. Wow. So, and also, I had more than one pair of shoes. And I never had more than one pair of shoes. So it was really, today, if you go in my walk-in closet today, I got maybe 25 pair of shoes because I won't throw them away.
Wow.
Anyhow, those are the little things in life that, and then I don't know where you want to go from there. After the Navy, I came out of the Navy. I was married. I had ended up having 1 child, 2 child, 3. I ended up having 3 children. And I work construction. I wheel concrete for construction workers. I end up working on a loading dock. I was a bartender, always at nighttime. Sometimes I'd work 2 jobs because in Chicago, when you work construction by October, you might be out of work, in the cold weather. So I was a bartender. I worked in my brother's photography business sometimes. I went from job to job to job, wandering aimlessly, never finding what it is that I felt fulfilled at. I ended up selling life insurance, and I was very successful at it. But I would be in a bar with my buddies at 2:00 in the morning. I'd say, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong. And I began to pray. I said, God, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing on this planet? Because I don't feel fulfilled at anything I do. And I was starting to fall into the trap of my father and also people in my neighborhood of drinking a little bit too much. I only drank beer, that's all I drank, but I drank a lot of it in those days. and I began to pray. And then I joined this civic group called the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, it was called in those days. And it was young men of action, men 18 to 36, that the community you lived in, you attacked the problems of that community. And in doing so, you were taught leadership training programs. You learned how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee. You learned how to chair a committee and delegate authority to the subcommittees. And you learn how to speak in front of an audience. They had programs like that. So I got very active in that. And I'm going to get out of this long answer to your short question shortly. But what changed my life is that I started working on community projects. And one of the things that was the biggest problem in our community were our youth using drugs. So I wrote a drug education program teaching 8th graders the ills of drug abuse with humor as a concept I had. Get the kids laughing, play some records, getting relaxed, and then plant the seeds of the ills of drug abuse that were happening in our community. And the night I proposed it to the JCs, for the JCs to sanction this project, that after I gave my proposal to the JCs and they agreed to sanction it, a young man came up to me, a young black man, and said, I'd like to help you with that project. And I said, gee, I'm sorry, but I already have a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer, and he was going to help me with the project. Again, I was praying, show me, God, what I'm supposed to be doing. The next day, as fate would have it, or prayers answered, John DeBoer called me and said, I can't help you. I've got another job, and I can't help you. I thought, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh, yeah, Tim Reed. So I got a hold of Tim, and we sat down and we worked on the program together. We went into the classroom, and the moment I walked in that classroom, I realized what a blessing having him with me. The children were black and white. They're integrated classes. We got their attention immediately. Now, mind you, this is 1969, 1968, I'm sorry, that we started doing a drug program. But in that time, and so the schools are integrated, and we got their attention right away, and the children, we got them laughing and playing records and everything, and plant the ills of drug abuse. The program became very successful. It became #1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. JCs wrote about it in their publications as a model program, how to teach elementary school children the ills of drug abuse, before they get into high school. Some of them were already using drugs. We realized we were too late in some cases. However, the program became successful. One day, a little girl walking out of the classroom said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team." An 8th grade girl. And 2 days later, Tim and I were sitting around talking, joking, and Tim said, "You remember what that little girl said?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you do that?" I said, "I'd do that." We didn't know the first thing about comedy. We didn't know anything about it.
What?
So we start thinking, why don't we, we start writing what we thought might be material.
Yes.
I was always good at storytelling, and I was always good at telling a joke behind the bar, that kind of thing, and a propensity toward being funny as well. Anyhow, so we were novices. There weren't any comedy clubs in America. There were none at that time. So we had to work nightclubs, and you had to get a nightclub act. So we failed. We went in a club and we bombed. But that night, something I wrote got a laugh, and it was like an epiphany, like one of those B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through, and my whole being went, "Oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. I want to make people laugh." The next morning, I couldn't sleep. It was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep. I was married. I had a wife and 3 kids. I couldn't sleep all night. I was so elevated. I got up the next morning. I walked to church that I had gone to as a little boy. I was an altar boy in that church, and no one was in the church. It was a Saturday. I got on my knees. I prayed. I said, "God, now I know what I want. I want to be a comedian. If you could let me make my living as a comedian, I promise I'll do charities. I'll give back." I was making all these promises, and that was September 1969. 50 years later, September 2019, I went back to that same church.
Wow.
And I gave a sermon on the power of prayer.
Oh my God.
And I told the congregation, right over there is where I knelt. And I asked God to let me be a comedian. And all my prayers have been answered. And so he kept his end of the bargain. I had to keep my end of the bargain by giving back to the community. That's a long story to a short question.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Permit me, Mr. Dreesen, I have this vuvuzela, supposed to be an instrument that originated from South Africa. And I have to blast it up every time something very powerful, very touching has been said. What you just shared with me is phenomenal. Yes, I am so happy. Not only are you a celebrity, but you're also a philanthropist because of the prayers that you made several decades ago. You kept your promise. God kept his promise. And I think this is by itself, this is already so inspiring. But I can't help but acknowledge the fact that it is thanks to the power of storytelling that I got to know about you. I got my copy of Tim and Tom.
Yeah.
And this, I think I heard of you over, maybe it was National Public Radio. I was driving somewhere in Oregon. And the story was so inspiring, so uplifting. I bought a copy and it was spellbound. I read from page to page. I took a lot of notes. So subsequently, when your second book came up, Still Standing, of course, I was going to get a copy. So I've not had it autographed by you, but I'm very sure that one of these days I will come to attend one of your storytelling sessions or comedic performances and get it autographed, because what you just shared with us, there are a lot of similarities between some of what you shared and some of the people that watch this. They are African immigrants from Africa who don't believe in getting any free ride. They work hard. And they grow up in homes that were certainly very, very different from the homes in which they live today. They did some very, very menial jobs growing up, maybe working at construction sites. And this is honorable work to begin with. This is honorable work. Yeah. It might be difficult, but it's honorable work, because without that, we'll not have beautiful places. And your early years are very similar. Without shoes, I can relate to that. I had my first pair of shoes at the age of 10, and shoes are the most prized object in my closet. So what I want to go on to ask from here is, with such a successful life, you could have been carried away and you forget about others, but you've mentored so many comedians. Newspapers have carried that. Media have talked about that. who are some of the people that you've mentored, and how do you choose who you get to mentor?
Well, first of all, I give motivation talks to corporate America, to at universities, at high schools, wherever motivation is needed. I do that, but also I do a specific one just for comedians called "The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There." I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those 4 points.
Perception, visualization,
self-talk, and develop a sense of humor.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And the reason I do that, and let me digress on one thing, and then I'll get back to that. The reason why I do it with comedians, but when I talk about the power of prayer, that I said to the congregation, how there we're thinking of someone you hadn't seen in a long time, and the phone rings, and you pick it up, and it's that person, and you say, I was just thinking about you, and they said, you know what, I was thinking about you too.
Yes.
I said, or you're walking down the street, you've been thinking about someone, and you bump into them and said, you aren't going to believe this, I was just thinking about you. And they said, I was thinking about you. And I said, how many of you have that happened? Raise your hand. And the entire congregation raised their hand. I said, if human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, I said, how much can a supreme being transfer? So that I do believe that God heard my prayers. I believe it to this day. Yes. Now, if you don't believe in God, that's your prerogative. But I really believe in that whole explanation of the power of prayer. We human beings have transferred thought.
Yes.
Think of the man who created the universe.
Yes.
And could he transfer thought? Anyhow, he or she, whatever. Anyhow, that's my point. So getting back to motivation is that when I was in the Navy, there was a guy aboard my ship named Washington. He was a black man from Florida. He had a 2nd grade education. And I was 17 years old, and I was reading books about sex and everything. I'm a young boy. I'm reading all these novels. And one day he said to me, Tommy, if you're going to read, if you like to read, why don't you read something that will improve your mind rather than decay your mind? And so I start reading Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, A Guide to Confident Living. I start reading all these books. I read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Maxwell Maltz, The Psycho-Cybernetics, Dale Carnegie, The Think and Grow Rich. I read all those books, and they inspired me. And so then I started inspiring my friends. Just even before I was in show business, I would tell them, you know what I read, you know what I heard, Anyway. So now the reason going into when I went into show business, I started inspiring comedians, standing behind a comedy store or giving them motivation talks, on the phone or something like that. And then one day I put together a whole program like that, things that inspired me. And the reason why I wanted to help comedians, 85% of all stand-up comedians I've met, Gideon, are either insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, love-starved wrecks.
Okay.
And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, I know how to write a joke and I know how to tell a joke. And I like to think I'm in the latter, but never trust somebody that tells you they're sane. But so I knew 5 stand-up comedians that committed suicide, 5 very talented stand-up comedians, and others who destroyed their lives with alcohol and drugs. Because it's a tough profession. And if you really want it bad enough, you're going to have to pay a lot of dues. You're going to have a lot of rejection over and over. You're going to get up there nights and it's not going to work when you're brand new. And you're going to think, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. You think the audience is the judge and the jury, it might be just a bad. So I knew the hardships of stand-up comedy. After the comedy team split up, I was out here on the West Coast sleeping in an abandoned car, as you know, if you read the book, an old Nash Rambler, where the front seat came down. I was hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard with a wife and three kids back in Chicago. So I paid a lot of dues, but I used those principles from those books over and over and over again. And I explain that to the audience that I'm working with visuals and comics. As I'm motivating them, there'll be visuals or video, authenticating what I'm talking about. A classic example is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. I was getting rejected after the comedy team split up, which broke my heart. I really thought Tim Tim Reed and I were America's first black and white comedy team, and history
Yes.
shows we were the last. There's never been one since.
Hmm.
And so, when that broke up, I prayed and thought we were going to become the greatest comedy team of all time, And when it broke up, it was like a broken marriage. So I ended up coming out here to be a stand-up comedian coming out the West Coast. And I slept in a car. I hitchhiked up and down Sunset Boulevard. And there was an old Nash Rambler with the front seat came down. It was up on blocks. I ended up sleeping in that for almost 30 days. Now, I had a wife and 3 kids in Chicago. My wife hated show business and wanted me out of it. She ended up telling me she's finished with me and all that. We ended up getting back together again. But she said, it's your dream, not mine. The whole world was coming down on me. And I was getting rejected. I was trying to get on at the Comedy Store because that's where the talent people came to see you.
Yes.
And I ended up getting rejected there. And finally, one night, after a bad night, I'm laying in that car, and I felt like the whole world came down on me. And I honestly started praying again. I said, God, I can't get anybody to manage me or represent me. So I'm going to go to sleep tonight, and I'm going to pray to you. Will you be my manager? Will you manage my life, manage my career? I said, and I know if you call William Morris, they're going to take your call. You call the agency. And I fell asleep, and it felt like I woke up in the morning. I felt like a boulder had come off my chest, And I began to visualize every night. The show to get on was the Johnny Carson show, the Tonight Show. 28 million people watched that show. One appearance on that show, Freddie Prinze, a comedian, got a sitcom the next day. Everybody knew that was a show to get to. I couldn't even get on at the Comedy Store so the Tonight Show could come and see me. So I would envision every night, as the book taught, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy, that the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. It only knows to program into it. And it works by visual. Whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve. Whatever it can see and believe, it will achieve. They said just before you go to sleep at night, when you first wake up in the morning, because that's when your conscious mind is most at rest, and your subconscious mind is then open to suggestion. So that's how you're hypnotized. They put your conscious mind to sleep, and they hop like a rabbit, and you hop like a rabbit. Because your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference of truth or fiction. It don't know what come into it. And it works with images. Whenever you say, gee, what was his name? What was his name? What was his name? And you go, Gideon, because what you did was you sent a picture back to your subconscious mind, and it rests till it finds a solution. So every night while I was sleeping in the abandoned car, I would see myself talking to Johnny Carson, him saying, you're a funny guy, Tom Dreesen, you're a funny guy. Knowing that if I was sitting next to him, I had already succeeded over there doing stand-up comedy.
Exactly.
Because in those days, you had to do 5 or 6 minutes and maybe 3 shots on the show before he'd call you over to sit down and talk to him. To America, when you did the Tonight Show as a stand-up comedian, you had arrived. But to our industry, you hadn't arrived till Johnny sat down and talked to you. I would envision him saying, you're a funny guy, Tom Dreesen, you're a funny guy. I would see it, I'd feel it, and I'd believe it. I'd see it, I'd feel it, and believe how great I'm going to feel. It took like a year, but I showed that picture to the class. I hold it up and I say, this is the picture I imaged in my mind.
Wow.
In the abandoned car. Nothing can become a reality unless it's thought first. Everything you see in front of you, see this bottle of water in front of you, or your watch or your shirt, or those were thoughts before they became realities.
Yes,
and
indeed.
One of the lessons I talk about visualization. And
that is incredible. Clearly, you have been able to conceive, pay the dues, and reach your goal. Sometimes I get to coach and train insurance agents on how to tell their backstory. Why? Because your backstory enables somebody to understand that you're doing this because you genuinely care about something broken you want to fix. And without a strong backstory, they think you're phony. They think you're just there because you want to make a quick buck, you want to make some money. So the insurance agents would tell me there's a lot of rejections in that business. And I think rejections is also common in other areas. You apply for a job, maybe you're qualified, you don't get it. You start to blame yourself, maybe because I'm immigrant, maybe because I have an accent. It's probably none of that, but maybe because you have not taken the time to visualize or to put yourself in the right company that cares about the values that you bring. But what I want to ask you is, how do you deal with rejection, especially if you find that those on the other side may think that you're different? And I think the people at the top, maybe they did Johnny Carson's, they thought you're different, you're a kid from Illinois, what do you know? How do you handle that on a day-to-day basis besides visualization and prayer? Are there any other tricks to it?
Well, when I sold life insurance, and I sold life insurance my first year, I was like a member of the $1 Million Round Table. My second year, I quit, and I went into show business.
First year, you were already a member of $1 Million Round Table.
Yeah, it was Columbus Mutual Life Insurance, and the president of the company flew into Chicago when I quit, and he said, "I've never ever done this before." He said, "But we had vested renewals, and he said, you've got such a great foundation. How could you possibly go into such a precarious business as show business? And you with a black guy, not that that's wrong." He said, "But a black-white comedy team has never existed. You're going to get all kinds of rejection all over the country." But I said, "But you don't understand the feeling that I had." But when I sold life insurance, when I would sit down and talk to a married couple about insurance, usually the woman was interested and the man wasn't that interested. But I would say, I didn't call it life insurance. I called it optional retirement income. Are we going to insure you? Yes, we are. But every dime, when you put money into us, we're going to keep your family insured all these years. And then I'd hold up a computer printout of we're going to return your money 2.5 times back when you get ready to retire. So it's a savings, but we're going to insure you all those years. I didn't call it death insurance. I called it life insurance. We want you to live. We want you to live, because if you invest in our company, we're going to keep your family insured. If God forbid something happens to you, we're taking care of them. But if you survive, and I show a printout, 2.5 times. So it's just that approach,
Wow.
To it. But rejection, I learned as a kid, as a little boy, there was a lot of rejection in my life. Again, coming from the poor side of town, So it's either going to destroy you or make you stronger. When the oldest cliches in the world, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and all those.
That's right.
Sometimes it would take a day or two to recover from that rejection.
Thank you.
But then I would turn it back over again, and I'd pray. I said, and I realized, and I tell successful people this all the time. I'll say, "Tell me about the worst things that happened to you on the way to this success." And terrible things have happened. I said, you have to understand that they happened for a reason. You wouldn't be where you are right now had you not had that rejection.
Exactly.
Every time you get fired from a job or something, you thought it was the end of the world, and you later got another job that led you to someone else that led you, and lo and behold, you look back and say, "God, had I not lost that job, I wouldn't be where I'm at today." So think of it, once you, again, I'm going back to prayer.
Yeah.
They say, "Ask and you shall receive."
Yeah.
Ask and shall you receive. Once you ask, you have to believe that that's going to happen. And so anything that happens on the way there is part of that journey. Even the rejections are part of that journey, especially if you learn something from that rejection. In comedy, it's very easy. Gideon, as you know, we would take tape recorders in those days, and I'd bring it home, and that joke didn't work, or this didn't work, and you'd listen and say, I telegraphed it. They saw it coming. I'm going to digress. When you're writing a joke, comedy is two things. Number one, it's 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. The other rule might be there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victimless joke? Me, the government, the airlines, my daughter's dating a punk rocker, the mailman, the grocery store. Somebody's wrong in his joke, and it might be, Rodney Dangerfield made a fortune at "I get no respect." He was wrong in every joke,
He was the target of his own joke. Okay. I'd like to dive into something that you and Mr. Tim Reed did, which is go to places that no one had gone and stand tall. And you would back him up sometimes, and sometimes he would back you up. You go to clubs where it's predominantly black, and sometimes you go to clubs that are predominantly white. And something that both of you did that was so brilliant is that you start backing up each other. Do you think that today, American society, we back up each other enough? Are we standing for each other and saying, you know what? Leave that one, leave that black guy, that's my own black guy, or leave that white guy, that's my that's my own.
One correction: we went to clubs that weren't predominantly black; they were all black. We went to clubs that weren't predominantly white; they were all white.
All white.
In the North and South. Again, 19. And you're too young, but 1969, the Civil Rights Act was passed in '64. We were only 5 years removed from the Civil Rights Act. Now, clubs weren't integrating. You know, they were staying in their own areas. There was slight integration, but most of the clubs we worked what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. It's an affectionate term that they gave to those clubs. The 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, the Cotton Club, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City. We worked all black clubs, and we worked all white nightclubs too as well. But so we would write material that would get that audience right away. You know, that particular audience. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. I had black friends since I was a little boy. You know, I grew up in that. And so I grew around the black culture and knew a lot about it, you know, and Tim, of course, was black. But Tim admits, and I didn't realize this till I read our book, that he said I was the first white friend he ever had. He grew up in a all black area in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia, and went to an all black grade school, all black high school, and all black college, Norfolk State College. And he said I was the first white friend that he ever had. He really didn't trust white people, and I'm not sure he still trusts them to this day. We joke about that all the time. But his children. Tim and I are the greatest of friends, and I realize everything I have, everything I own, everything I've become is because I met that man. My whole life changed, and he says the same thing about me. Wow. His children call me Uncle Tom. You know, which is really a funny thing. You know, call me an Uncle Tom. But anyhow, that when we went into those clubs, we began to write material that would get their attention right away. First of all, when we walked on a stage, you know, audiences would be talking, all of a sudden a hush would go and say, "Whoa, what's going on here? Now? What the heck is going on here?" We worked a place called the Club Harlem, and 1,300 black people. The owner was Pop Williams. It was in Atlantic City before they ever had gambling, and they would have the opening act was Mama Lou Parks and her dancers. It was a heavyset black woman who had all these young dancers, and they'd get the audience rocking, and then there would be a black singing group and a black girl singing group, guy singing group, then comedy, and then the headliner would be Smokey Robinson or the Temptations or the OJs. But anyhow, the MC would go out and he'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got a comedy team here. Are you ready for some comedy?" And they go, "Yeah. We got a comedy team from Chicago. This team came all the way from Chicago, and it's the first time this team has ever been here." He kept saying team. And he'd welcome the comedy team of Tim and Tom, and Tim would go out there by himself. And he'd say, "We're really happy to be here. We just got into Atlantic City last night, and we really like it here. And we think," and pretty soon the brothers are saying, "We." I don't see we. I see he. Where's we? And then slowly I would come out stage left. I'd come out and a spotlight would hit me, you know. And now you hear the others, what do we got here? And I'd slowly work my way up stage left, and I'm looking into the audience, looking. I'd work my way to Tim center stage, and Tim would say, "Where you been, man?" I said, "I don't see any of my people out there." Audience is roaring. Tim said, "No, I don't think any of your people are out there." And I put my arm around him, and I'd say, "Well, we better be funny." And he'd say, "What do you mean, we, white man?" And the room would erupt in laughter. And then we'd have them, you know.
That was incredible. I read that and I was like, wow. You both were so funny right out of the gate. Looked like you all had funny bones. And did I read somewhere that both of you attempted to go to South Africa? Am I wrong? Still, that was in the days of apartheid. Am I getting this one wrong? Because it's been a while since I read the book.
Tim went there by himself after the team split up. He was opening for Della Reese, who ended up, she was the woman who broke up our act. We both have different interpretations, but to me, she was the reason they broke up our act. And the funny thing was, when Tim and I decided we were going to become a comedy team, we hadn't done anything yet. The only connection I had with show business, where I lived at in Harvey, Illinois, there was a black singing group called the Dells. They had several hit records. "Oh, What a Night," "Stay in My Corner," and they all still lived in Harvey. And Marvin, the lead singer, used to live across the street from me. We grew up together. And most of the Dells, I grew up with them, different parts of the neighborhood. So I went to Tim and I went over to Marvin's house and told him we want to become a comedy team, because he'd been in show business for years, and I wanted his advice. And he thought it was a great idea. Oh, no one's ever done that before, blah, blah, blah. And he gave us encouragement. But when we were leaving his house, well, I never forget, he stood out on the stoop, and as Tim and I walked in the car, he said, hey, we say, they're going to try to break you up. We turned around and he said, who? He said, there's a game people play called Divide and Conquer.
Oh.
He said, and they're going to try to break you up. There are going to be people that they're going to say, hey, Tim, you don't need that white boy. You're funnier without that white boy. Or they say, Tom, you don't need that brother. He said, and Tim and I got in the car and said, no one's going to do it. We're like too old. They ain't going to do that to us. And sure enough, years later, a woman, she wanted to break us up.
Oh my God.
It's the one thing after 6 years of touring the nation with Tim, all over the North and the South. Tim and I both agreed to this. We would go anywhere there was racial tension. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did the county jail in Chicago 3 times. We did high schools, colleges, wherever there was racial tension. And at that time, there were riots all over America. One of the largest riots in the country was in Harvey, Illinois, where I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in. The students were protesting the Vietnam War everywhere. And African Americans were rioting in major cities, feeling disenfranchised from the system. So in the midst of all this, we're going all across the land trying to make people laugh. But I can't tell you how many times any college, any high school, any prison where they had racial tension, Tim and I go there and perform. I can't tell you how many times afterward, a young white kid would come up to me and say, I got a black friend. He'd tell Tim and I got a black friend that I'd like to reach out to. But if I do, the white guys are going to call me names. But after watching you and Tim, I'm going to reach out to my black friend. Then a black kid would come up and say, I got a white friend. And I kind of like him a lot. But the brothers are going to wear me out. But watching you and Tim on stage, I'm going to reach out to my friend. That meant more to us than anything else that you could ever do. And that happened time after time. And even to this day, the young kids that we talked to, we live on drugs and stuff like that. They're not young anymore. They now have grandchildren. But they will say that to me. I'll be in the city and they'll say, you don't know how much you inspired us,
Wow. Without a doubt, you epic us. We hope there will be others that can even try or attempt to follow that act. But for anyone who has not followed your work, the work of Mr. Tom Dreesen, you've toured with some of the greatest names in show business. Sammy, Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, so many. And when I read them, I'm like, oh my God, your body of work is so deep, is so vast. One person will be happy to have had just one of them. But I want you to take us to some unique moments, maybe with Sammy Davis Jr., or maybe with Frank Sinatra, because you even acknowledge that you went from shining shoes of Mr. Sinatra when he passed away. But before that, you were his opening act. You go to some of the greatest cities in America and around the world to perform. And before he comes on the stage, before they see his face, they see you first. Are there some unique moments from him or from Sammy Davis Jr. that you want to share with some of our people so that they know the power of prayer, they know the power of work ethic, and the power of sticking to what speaks to your heart?
Why Sammy Davis meant so much to me. When I first did my first appearance on The Tonight Show, I started doing all kinds of shows after that. And one of them was with Sammy Davis. Sammy Davis had a talk show. He aired it out of Lake Tahoe at Harris Hotel. Yeah. It was called Sammy and Company. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do his show. I was doing all the other shows. And I kept bugging my agent, get me on that show. And she couldn't get me on the show. She said, Tom, the ratings aren't great. So they're trying to get big names, the big stars and stuff. But I kept bugging her. And she said, Tom, you're doing all these other shows. Why do you want to do that show, Sammy show? I said, because I saw him when Tim and I were a comedy team. In Chicago, they had the Black Exposition. It was 1 week of black businessmen and women coming together in Chicago for exchanging ideas and all that. And it culminated with a big show in a big arena, in a big arena in Chicago. And all these acts would come in and perform for the all-black audience. All the Motown acts, Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight and the Pips, OJ's, The Temptations, comedians. And Tim and I were in the wings, and I was the only white guy there. And because Tim and I we performed at it. But what they would do with the comedian, they'd say when the singer comes on, the singer leaves, we need to strike the stage and set up for the next singer. They'd get a comedian have to do 5-10 minutes. And so Tim and I stayed there like 6 hours before we got on, but I didn't care. I was seeing all these incredible acts. And Sammy Davis Jr. had come in all the way from overseas, like 3,500 miles, to be on that show. 4 months prior to that, Sammy had been at the White Nixon, gave him an award for something, and he hugged President Nixon. Now, Sammy was a hugger. When you got to know Sammy, he hugged stop signs. You know, he hugged everybody. So when he hugged President Nixon, that picture was taken and put on the cover of Ebony magazine, Jet magazine, all the black publications. And Sammy became persona non grata in the black community because they were very anti-Nixon. So, but Sammy went there because Nixon promised to help things in the black community, and Sammy accepted the award, and he hugged President Nixon. But now this is the first time he's appearing in front of a black audience after that picture was taken all over.
Yeah.
The MC goes out and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the wings." And when first Sammy was backstage, everybody was, "Wow, Sammy Davis Jr., wow, he's this great entertainer." The MC said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you know, blah, 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 welcome Sammy Davis Jr." And thousands of people began to boo and scream, "Boo, get off the stage, you Uncle Tom, you white man's N-word," and blah, blah. Oh, they were just boo. And they were booing him so loud. He was trying to get his conductor, George Rhodes, into the countdown so the music would drown out the boos and the cheers. But George had the headphones on and couldn't hear. And finally, Sammy stood there while they jeered and booed and screamed and called him names. And he wouldn't leave the stage. He stood there. The MC came back out. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, what is our struggle all about if it isn't about individual freedom? That a man or a woman could be a Protestant, a Catholic, a Jew, a Democrat, a Republican. Isn't that what we're fighting for? The man came 3,500 miles to sing for you. Doesn't he at least deserve to be heard?" And mumble grumble, everybody sat down. And Sammy went over and changed his sheet music, and he sang one song, and he got a standing ovation. And it moved me more than I can ever tell you to this day. He sang "I Gotta Be Me" from the Broadway play. And the lyrics, "Whether I'm right," he walked that stage, and whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, whether I find a place in this world or never belong, I gotta be me. I'll go it alone if that's how it must be. I can't be right for somebody else if I'm not right for me. And through the song, we're going, oh my God. First of all, we had knots in our stomach that he was being booed. But halfway through the song, we're looking, you see what he's doing? He's bringing that crowd back with one. In my 55 years in show business, I've seen a lot of people take a tough crowd and after 45 minutes get them. I've seen them, work an audience. I've never seen anybody take a hostile audience and in one song get a standing ovation. They stood and they were saying, like, "We still don't believe your politics, but that was pretty special." That was pretty special. And that inspired me so much, even when I was struggling of thinking, wow. When my wife wanted me out of show business, when my people and my in-laws were rejecting me, I remembered Sammy's song, "I'll go it alone if that's how it must be. I can't be right for somebody else if I'm not right for me. I couldn't be the best father, the best brother, the best neighbor if I wasn't right for me." So and Sammy, and so that's why I wanted to work with Sammy. And she got me on the show. There was a cancellation one night, and she got me on the show, and I rushed to Tahoe, and I did a killer set. I did all the stuff about growing up in a black neighborhood and playing basketball on an all-black basketball team. And Sammy was roaring. He just roared, and he called me over to the couch. I wasn't supposed to go sit with him. He went and got me. I've got the video. Someday I'll send it to you. He went and got me, sat me down. But he told me, he said, "I'm going to take you on the road with me." And he took me on the road with him for 3 years. I never worked Las Vegas. He took me to Las Vegas. They put my name on the marquee, huge. Tom Dreesen. Most opening acts didn't even get their name on the marquee, but Sammy was so good to me. And because anyhow, he knew my background, and Tim and Tom and growing up, he was so good to me. The first night at Caesar's Palace, the toughest room in Las Vegas to work at Caesar's Palace. I was under contract to 9 different hotels in Las Vegas. Caesar's is the toughest because it had a high ceiling, and laughter is sound. It hits the ceiling and comes at you. You want a low ceiling. The Desert Inn, the Sands Hotel, the Golden Nugget, the Riviera. I love working those rooms. They had a low ceiling.
Yep, it bounces back at you and touches your heart.
And we work off of the laughter. Laughter is sound. It goes up and then it slowly comes down. You never move on your next line when the laughter's on its way up. You cut your laugh up. Some nights you move right here. Some nights you let it come down. Some nights you let it I explain it to comedians that
Yeah.
that laughter, timing. I can teach you a lot of things about comedy. I can't teach you timing. You either have it or you don't. And it's when to move on the next line. If somebody threw a rock straight up in the air, pretend that's laughter. It goes up and then it comes all the way down and it lands in a pond, and then it ripples all across the pond. Some nights you never move on that laughter when it's on its way up. Some nights, because of the crowd, you move when it's here. You move when it's here. Some nights you move when it's here. Some nights you let it hit the pond. Some nights you hit the pond, you let it ripple.
Wow.
I can't tell you how I'm going when I go out there to let my brain reads the audience. But that sometimes you pause, that long pause, because they're still out there. But that's timing, So anyhow, Sammy, and also they serve dinner at Caesar's Palace. So a comedian trying to work during dinner, waiters and waitresses bang the tail.
Yeah,
It's you're gonna bomb. Sammy knew that, so the entertainment director said, his name was Nat Brandywine. He said, Tom, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. We do a 90-minute show here. Sammy came up and he said, no, Nat, this is Tommy's first time here. I'll come out first and I'll do 4 songs. All the critics are in the audience. In those days, if you got a great review, there was like 7 different newspapers. There was a Variety magazine, the Hollywood Reporter. He said, Tommy needs to get a good review here, because if he does, he'll keep coming back here. Comedians bomb during that dinner. They always bomb during the dinner.
Wow.
So Sammy, now the waiters and waitresses, their job is to get that food out of there before the headliner comes out. Sammy would come out and start singing. He'd sing like 4 songs. Well, the waiters and waitresses had to get the food. They were taking food eating yet. But when Sammy got done with 4 songs, now the room is here. He's got them up here,
Yep.
Hi. He's got them up here. And then he'd say, ladies and gentlemen, you've been with me through the years. I think of my audience as a family. You stuck with me in my good times and my bad times. So what do you do when people are kind to you? You want to do something for them, like maybe bring them a gift. I saw this young guy, and you're going to love him. But sometimes I'd say, don't overdo it, Sammy. he would bring me out. Yeah. And I'd walk out, and my opening line would say, I always dreamed I'd work Las Vegas, and I always dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act. And yeah, long story short, I'm saying that's how giving he was.
Yes.
And one more thing I'll tell you. In the afternoon, the first night, rehearsal was over. It was 2 hours before showtime. I'm out on stage. I'm just trying to familiarize myself with this big stage. Sammy saw me. He came out and he said, "You're a little nervous?" He came out of his dressing room. I said, well, it's opening night, and I'm opening for you, and I've never worked Las Vegas before. Yeah. He said, see these boards on this stage, Tommy? You earned every one of these boards. These boards on this stage. You earned it. You belong here. You paid the dues to get here. This is your stage. Don't let them take that from you. Wow. If they could do what you do, they'd be up here. They can't do what you do. That's why they're out there. And that's why I wanted to open for Sammy Davis Jr. And I stayed with him 3 years. He was, he's not really given credit. I mean, everybody, you had to see him. He was the most incredible entertainer. There was nothing he couldn't do on a stage. He could sing as good as anybody out there. He never hit a clinker. Frank Sinatra said, I never heard Sammy hit a clinker. Frank once in a while hit a clinker. He could sing as good as anybody. He could dance better than anybody. He could do comedy as good as any comedian. He could do impressions. To me, he was one of the best impressions in the country. He could play the piano. He could play the drums. He could play the xylophone. He was a parade.
Wow.
And I would sit in the wings night after night watching this incredible entertainer. It was like show business 101. And then Sammy, of course, loved Frank Sinatra because Frank Sinatra opened doors for him in the business. Yes. When black people could not, when they could work in Las Vegas in the casinos, but they couldn't stay there. Yes. They had to live in what Sammy used to call it Colored Town. He said they made us stay in Colored Town. Frank Sinatra said, they can't stay here, then I don't play here.
Wow. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, back in that day, And
it changed, I'm sure it changed the reactions and the responses of the people that were booking there.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Yeah. It was, and I mean, there's a lot of stories about that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story that Frank told me that, and Sammy Davis told me about it before I ever knew it from Frank. But Sammy was working with the Will Maston trio. That was his dad and his uncle. It wasn't really his biological uncle, but he called him Uncle Will. Anyhow, they were a hot act. They were the hottest act. And Frank went to Harlem one night to see him. And he was so impressed with this young guy, Sammy Davis, he went backstage and told him, he said, "You're amazing." And Sammy's going, "Oh, Frank Sinatra. Oh, my God." And Frank said, "Come and see my show. You know, I'm at some theater. I think it was at Paramount or something. But, you know," so a week goes by, and Frank goes back down to Harlem and sees the show for a second time. And he goes backstage and he tells Sammy, I'm mad at you." And Sammy said, "Why?" He said, "I've seen your show twice now, and you never came to see my show." He said, "Frank, I came. They wouldn't let me in." Frank said, "What?" He went back, and he needed the money. He went back and he got to the manager, and he took a contract, ripped it up, and threw it in his face. Said, "I'll never work this theater again." And he didn't. You know, and they tried to sue him, but then Frank knew some people that, you know. And yeah, but that's my point. That their relationship was the same kind of relationship years later that Tim and I were having. You know.
Yes.
We weren't the big names like they were, but you know, anyhow. And then that led me to working with Frank, you know, eventually.
Incredible. Incredible.
I want to tell you the quick story. I'm probably talking too long here, but
no. This is gold. This is gold. I am happy to just listen. Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah, now after I toured with Sammy said, "Stay with me 3 years, a couple of years, and then you got to move on your own." Anyhow, so I started touring with Gladys Knight and the Pips. I did shows with you know, Mac Davis, Tony Orlando and Dawn, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. I was working with different artists, you know, all over. Lola Falana. I was working with everybody. Singers like me to open for them because in those days you had to work clean. That was before cable television. How do I become a national comedian? You had to get on the Johnny Carson show. Well, how do you get on the Johnny Carson show? I'd watch. You had to write material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. You couldn't say "go to hell." You couldn't say "damn."
Yeah.
Then cable television came along, and you could be as filthy as you want to be. And that now young kids today think that's what comedy is. You just have to swear as much as you want to. And you know, in my day, you couldn't do that. So singers like that and act like that because you warmed their audience up, and you didn't offend them. You know, they didn't want you offending them and then come out to a hustle. So I was opening for all these singers. And then Smokey Robinson. Smokey and I became the best of friends. I toured with Smokey, you know, and opened for him. And I was opening for Smokey at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And Frank Sinatra was over next door at Harrah's Hotel. And I had worked Harrah's many times with Sammy and everybody. So in the week that I was there, again, divine intervention. I said, one night I want to go see Frank Sinatra because I was a fan. When I was a little boy, shining shoes on the tavern, he was on every jukebox, you know. And so I want to go see Frank. And I'd seen him perform a couple of times. So of all the nights, I don't know why I chose that night. I said, I think I'll go this night. And I called the maitre d' over there. He said, "Okay, Tommy, we'll save a spot for you." I finished my show, and I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. And I ran over to Harrah's Hotel from Caesars in Lake Tahoe. There's a casino between those two. And I ran through the casino. And I'm running into the showroom because I didn't want to miss Frank Sinatra's opening. I'd seen him walk out on stage. I saw him perform twice before that. When he walked out on stage, the electricity. He created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. You know? So I didn't want to miss that opening. As I'm running into the showroom, the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, I had worked for him many times. He saw me and he was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. He said, "Tommy, come here. And I reluctantly went over there because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. He said, "Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin." Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer, powerful guy. He said, "Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra." And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face, like he heard it a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he said, "Hey, kid." He looked at me. He said, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, "Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? He said, "Oh, I like this kid." And a week later, they called me to go with Frank and to the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. And I thought, I'll work with him 1 week. I'll get my picture taken with him. I'll hang in every bar back where I grew up. And so the second night I was with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. And I can remember like it was yesterday, his knife and his fork down. He said, "I like your material. And I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." I said, "Yeah."
You cannot.
And in the 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year in front of 20,000 people. and arenas and Hawaii in front of 40,000 people. A great challenge. I mean, I turned down more sitcoms in those years than most comedians get offered in a lifetime, because I knew this was the end of an era. And I was touring with this guy that when I was a boy shining shoes, he was on all the jukeboxes. This is Frank Sinatra. It was a wonderful tour. We became friends. I stayed at his home 6 times a year. I rode around with him at night. He stayed up till dawn. He was nocturnal. He never went to bed till the sun came up. So I stayed up with him at night, and he told me stories of his childhood. And he was first he was the boss of this tour, and a great boss. And then he was like a buddy. We were pals. We hang out. And then toward the end of his life, he was more like a father to me. He gave me so much advice, and I miss him every day of my life. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life. It was so exciting. But anyhow,
wow, it is like reading a textbook on American show business, listening to you. And each of your books, I have soaked them up. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Even Shakespeare, if he reads you, he'll be shaken. If Mark Twain, there's some phrases that I've had to underline and go back to them over and over and over. And from what you said, you did not go to college, but I think this is a testament to the power of continuous education. I love education. I love reading. I love most of those people that you've mentioned there. I've read them. And I wanted to talk a little bit to young people who are not taking education seriously. Some of them, they are born in America, born to immigrant parents. Some of them are Americans. They don't take education seriously. And I doubt what can they accomplish without education. The world is getting more and more competitive. I'm sure you've had to pour a lot of time reading, writing, learning to be so successful. Otherwise, how could you work with these greats who have lawyers, who have all kinds of people that gatekeepers that will stop you from getting in? You have to get in because your ability, the fact that you're informed, you have the knowledge. Talk to the power of knowledge, power of education for young people who want to be successful.
Well, I'm very much self-taught. I mean, I dropped out of high school. I started reading everything I could. When I came out of the service, I went to night school, junior college, and I studied political science. And I wanted to be a politician at that time, I thought. And I became a comedian, and there's a lot of similarities. Yeah. But, I think where the colleges, most colleges make mistakes. I have met sometimes more educated fools than I have uneducated fools. The colleges teach them how to learn, not what to learn. Teach them how to debate. When I talk to classes, I say, challenge me. Wow. I don't know. Challenge me. Don't think that everything I say should be chiseled in stone. Wow. If you have a better idea, I want to hear it. Challenge it. I think that teachers now, they politicized our colleges so much, but I think you should be taught how to learn, how to tackle problems, how to. There are answers out there in the books, and if you're having a problem. I went to the books because I was an avid reader. I loved to read, especially when I was in the service. So I, as my friend Washington taught me, to read books that will improve your mind, to study the masters. What is it you want to be in life? Say you want to, if you were to become a brain surgeon, you wouldn't just read about brain surgery. You'd go watch the brain surgeon operate. And if you can, talk to a brain surgeon. Tell him, I want to be one like you. Tell me, give me some advice. I say this about comedians all the time. If you want to become a comedian, go watch other comedians perform. If on the stage you want to be on, go watch people perform on that stage. And if you can, talk to that comedian and say, how did you get there? And watch how that comedian, don't take parts of his act. You got to write your own act. But watch how they go from one subject to another, or how their stage presence, or their microphone technique. I've seen a lot of comedians who have very bad microphone technique. But knowing when to pull the mic into for a punchline, or when to pull away, or whatever. Anyhow, study the masters. If you don't know what it is, if you know what you want to be in life, that's great if you're young. And then therefore you've got to direct goal, and you can ask people in that profession, how did you get there? Please tell me how you, I snuck backstage of comedians, and I would knock on their door and ask them for advice. I'd say, I'm a comedian, will you give me some advice? So that's what I'd say, and also, start where you are. Yeah. If you're going to become a comedian, start where you are. You live in Toledo, start there. Work as often as you can. Get up on stage as many times as you can, even if not as a comedian. Maybe you're just going to MC, but get in the habit of being stage presence. 3, you might want to read the book, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol.
The magic of believing.
The magic of believing. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect others to believe in you? But The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. It's not about comedy. It's just another motivation book. Yeah. And 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. And people think, no one's ever going to help me. I said, they're not going to help you until you can make money for them. In show business, it's called show business. That's 2 words, show and business. So if when you can make money for them, then they're going to, when you develop an act that gets sold, so it's up. If it is to be, it's up to me. I got to make myself marketable. I look around at other comedians or other doctors or other lawyers are making money or whatever this profession you want in, and see how they got there. So, and then 5, don't ever quit. Bertrand Russell said, there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have. That's my story, and that's doctors, lawyers. There are a lot of people that were rejected all their lives too, but don't ever quit. If that's your dream, this is your lifetime on a planet. I tell this to classes sometimes. This planet is something that changed my life. I was on it when I first started getting hot after I did the Tonight Show. Yeah. I was taking every job that came along. I mean, you're being rejected for so many years and not having any money. Whatever they'd tell me, I'll take that. I'll go there. I could get 3 hours sleep and I could jump another plane. And one time I was on a plane going east and I looked out the window and I saw myself on a plane going west. I think I'm working too hard. But one time I was on a long plane ride from LA to Boston, and I had read everything on the plane but the air sickness bag, and I was, and I picked up a magazine and it was about anthropology and stuff like that. It was Dr. Carl Sagan. It was very interesting. But anyhow, so it said it said this planet has been here 5 billion years, not thousands, not millions, 5 billion years, that this planet. And it's going to be here another 5 billion before the sun destroys the earth, that the earth is actually moving closer to the sun. And one day this planet will look not unlike Mars looks like right now. And I set that magazine down and I said, this planet was here 5 billion years before I was born, not thousands, not 5 billion before and it's going to be here 5 billion after I die. That means my lifetime on this planet is a blink of an eye.
Yes.
Boom.
Passes like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You would spend one moment of that blink of an eye bitching and moaning and cursing your lot in life as an absurdity. If you would spend one moment of that blink of an eye going to a job that you hate every day, living with someone who doesn't love you or you don't love, this is that spitting in your master's face, saying, "I don't appreciate this great gift of life." Every day is a celebration. Every day you open your eyes. What wonderful thing am I going to do? What for someone else? What is someone else going to do for me? Who will I meet? What will I change? Could I change the lives? Emerson said, you've lived a good life if you leave this world better than you found it.
Yes.
So every day is a celebration. But that moment that came to me, I said, oh my God, I'm only going to be here for a blink of an eye. In the annals of time, you're here for a blink of an eye. Go out and do what it is you want to do. Find the work that you love in that blink of an eye. And I'll close with this. The day that I began to really live, was the day that I totally embraced the fact that one day I was going to die. And people say, well, we all know that. I said, no, yeah, but we put it on the back burner. Once you realize, yes, you're only here for a blink of an eye. One day we're all going to die. Then you have a choice. You can live every day until you die, or you can die every day until you die. And complaining and bitching and moaning and doing things that you don't like, and that's dying every day until one day you die. But you can live every day until you die. today is a celebration. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Woo. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dreesen. I could not be more grateful. I know this has changed me. It's gonna make me a better person, and I'm very sure that other people are going to benefit from this. I would not want to abuse your time, but I would connect with you to find a good time to come out, watch one of your shows in person, not virtually, because there's so much more that I could cover, but I just know that I am forever grateful. You're the first celebrity guest on the Story Warrior channel. And I pray and I thank you for your time, for your generosity, for reaching out to me and helping me, even though you've never met me in person. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your philanthropy and all that you do. Serving the homeless in LA every year. There's no other comedian that I know at your level of success that has the humility to go and help these homeless people with the likes of Tiffany Haddish and all the others. Thank you so much for the goodness you put into the world, sir.
Oh, that's what you got to give it back. You can't keep taking from the stream. You have to give it back. It was given to me as a child when the people would bring in food to a home, and that's what I have to do. Well, we could go on and on. Every year I would run 26 miles. My sister Darlene had multiple sclerosis. She passed away. But every year I would run 26 miles, and we called it 26 miles for Darlene. And people would pledge money for every mile I ran. And I'd bring all my celebrity friends and 15, 20 celebrity friends, and they would run a block or 2 blocks or 3 blocks, or they'd run a mile. Smokey Robinson's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me.
Wow.
But these were, that's what we do. We, in our business, or in any business, if you become successful in that business, you can't keep taking from the stream. You have to give it back.
Yes, sir.
Anyhow, I could talk for another 2 hours with you, but
thank you. I know if I could be of any help, it might not be necessary, but if a young man with a weird name and a goofy accent, if I can be of any help to a great legend like you, please do not hold back. I'll be so grateful to put it back into the stream. And thank you so much, Mr. Dreesen.
You're more than welcome. Tell me, Gideon, where do you live right now?
I live now in Dallas, Texas. We moved here from Oregon about 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yes.
I go once in a while. I'll go to Dallas. By the way, on December 12th, which is 2 days away, the Dallas newspaper is doing a story on me about Frank's birthday, Frank Sinatra's birthday.
Wow.
It's December 12th.
December 12th. I will make sure I get it.
It'll be on the Dallas. And that's no big deal. But
okay. I will get a copy of it, and I'll connect with you to know where you are performing. If you perform in the next couple of months, I want to check it out this winter or into spring. Yeah,
I may come to Dallas. You never know. That happens,
Okay. Anyway. How can someone find some more information about you? I know you don't like to plug often, but how can they reach out to you in case they want to benefit from your storytelling, your coaching, your mentorship, or maybe have a celebrity performance, or they come and watch you perform at when you do golf fundraising?
They can go to tomdreesen.com. That you spell it right there. Tomdreesen.com, and it's my website, and you can contact me through that. And it has my manager's name and all that stuff, but you can contact me through that. And I try to respond to people that contact me there.
Are you still touring?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do a one-man show now. I do a 90-minute show called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. It's stand-up comedy.
Yes.
But I come out and a big screen comes down. It introduces me of all my accomplishments. And I walk out and I do stand-up comedy for about a half hour. And I go to a bar and there's a bottle of Jack Daniels on the bar, which was Frank's drink of choice. And I sit down and Frank comes on the screen and he's singing. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. Like he's singing to me behind the bar. When he goes off screen, a spotlight hits me and I say, the first time I heard that voice, I was 10 years old, shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago. And he was on the jukebox. And I take the audience from that little boy hearing Sinatra on the jukebox on the south side of Chicago to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. And so I take him on that journey. And while I'm telling stories, pictures are coming on the screen, authenticating the stories and video. And it's a lot of laughs and there's some tears in there. I talk about the Tim and Tom years, the struggle, but I end up with a closing monologue and making the people laugh. And I finally toast them and I say, I wish for all of you what Frank Sinatra wished for you. The very last song that he ever sang on stage is that the best is yet to come. And I say, good night, everybody. And Frank is singing, the best is yet to come. Anyway,
And where can we if somebody's buying tickets, if I want to buy tickets for my wife for a birthday, where can we come to?
well, I've taken some time off, and I'm going to start booking for all next year. But and anybody who sees this who wants to book it in their theater, they can just contact me. It's a fun show. It's a fun show.
Okay. I will be getting into that I want to give my wife a pleasant surprise for our 50th. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I will connect offline, and thanks for the blessings.
Thank you, Gideon, for what you're doing. Somewhere out there, every time you do this, somewhere out there, somebody's being moved by you and motivated by you. And one day they'll come to you and say, I'm a success today because I watched your show. And that you changed the life. And Emerson said, you lived a good life if you leave the world better than you found it. And you're doing that. Thank you, Gideon.
Thank you, sir. Have a blessed day.
Okay, Gideon. You too.
Okay. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.